Good day and welcome to Letters and Politics. I'm Mitch Jeserich. Today I'm very happy to welcome back an old friend to this radio program, Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is a professor emeritus of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and visiting professor at the New School in New York. He is host of the weekly program Economic Update, and he's the author of many books, including his very newest, Understanding Capitalism. And he joins us for a conversation about the election and economics. Richard Wolff, always good to see you, sir. Thank you once again for taking this time today.
My pleasure, Mitch. A program like yours deserves everything that the people like me around can possibly offer. You reach an audience, you've engaged that audience, and the country needs it more than ever. So it's my honor and my pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a part of whatever success we have had, which is questionable, but whatever we have had is certainly in large part thanks to your help over the years. What you are known as a Marxist economist, maybe a leading Marxist. I think a leading Marxist economist. How do you take these accusations that Kamala Harris is a Marxist?
Well, it clearly, in the mouth of Donald Trump, is just another nasty phrase he can heave over at her. He's been doing it ever since she replaced Biden on the ticket.
And they're calling Biden a Marxist.
Yes, yeah, why not? You know, once you're going to do this sort of thing, you do it free form. I mean, maybe all the people in the room were Marxists. Maybe he'll blame the two questioners for being that too. Why not? It's an empty thing. It's what in mathematics is called the null set. It's a set of numbers that includes nothing. It's null. It's zero. If you know anything about the history of Marxism, or the past of Marxism, or the role of Marxism in the United States, or what Marxists actually say or do, then it wouldn't dawn on you to call Kamala Harris a Marxist. Nothing about what she did as a lawyer in California, or as an attorney general, or then as a senator, nothing qualifies. It means you either don't know what Marxism is, which I'm sure is the case with Mr. Trump, but it also probably means you could care less. You have noticed, because you're not dead, you have noticed that it's a nasty word to use here in the United States, that it has all kinds of horrible associations, and so you say it. For me, it had exactly the same content as Mr. Trump's passing reference to his campaign vice presidents telling us that we should beware of immigrants because they will eat our pets. You know, I don't know if you've heard that one, Mitch. If not,
this came from J.D. Vance. This came from J.D.
right.
Vance.
In Ohio, he said there is a Haitian immigrant who ate somebody's dog or cat or whatever. I mean, the mentality of doing that. Put aside the horrible scapegoating of immigrants that this is that what this is for. Put that aside. That's horrible, but put it aside. But the level of discourse, you've got, 50 million Americans watching a debate, trying to understand where their country is going and what choice they should make in a couple of months. And you make this stuff up in order to say negativity about your opponent. It's somewhere between horrific and childish and immature and stupid. It's a horrible mix of these bad ingredients. It has no content. I could tell you, we've discussed it, what a Marxist view of this or that might be. Kamala Harris does not produce those, not in written form, not in her verbal statements, none of it. So it's just make-believe.
It's interesting.
It has the same equivalence as if, and to her credit, she didn't do this, but as if she had turned to him and said, well, which of your pets did you eat? What? Really? Are we really going to do this?
Sociologically, this is interesting. As you said, there's a long history about painting Marxists as this scary, terrible thing, which has never stopped, and it continues today. We see it in this election by falsely claiming that Kamala Harris is a Marxist. As you say, anyone who knows anything about Marxism knows that she's certainly not a Marxist. But now the other, the sort of the side, well, I guess, I was going to say this, the side monster to it now is immigrants, and I also guess people who are transgender. And this reminds me back in the day too of the way homosexuality and communism was coupled together.
Yeah, look, it's very hard in a capitalist society. I'll put on my Marxist hat. In a capitalist society, you always have a conflict. It's built into the core of the system. Think about it. I've been a professor of economics all my life, and I've taught courses in business and business schools. And in business schools, we train young men and women and so forth who want to become entrepreneurs and all of that. And we say to them things like, if you want to be successful in business, go to where the wages are relatively low and where the market is relatively large and growing. If you have those conditions, then you have conditions for the success of a business. And if those conditions are missing, it's harder to get your business off the ground or to build it or to grow it. And we teach that, and it has its grain of truth, but it also is missing something. Because if you go where the wages are low, you're going to a place where the people don't have the income with which to buy the products of your business. And what you've achieved by saving on labor will come back to haunt you as a shortage of buyers and, insufficient effective demand, to use the language of economics. Right? If you're a good teacher, you teach that you better be careful not to follow this advice blindly or dogmatically, because there are other conditions and they are wrapped up here, and it's more complicated. Okay? This mentality is something that ought to be understood by everybody. And it would be if it weren't loaded up with our Cold War history of the last 75 years, in which we all were told we're threatened by the Soviet Union and atomic warfare and all the things that have frightened our entire generation, yours and mine, and everything since. So we can't think in a balanced way. So how do we think? Well, we think like advertising. Advertising is a very peculiar discourse. In advertising, you tell the world everything positive that you can think of about your client's product. If the things you can say about their good qualities aren't enough, you make up good qualities. We see that all the time. At the same time, you hide and disguise every negative quality or deny it altogether. Okay, this produces a very bad result. It means that on the one hand, we teach our young people everything has two sides or motives, and you have to balance them. And, thought is a complicated process. Yet the advertising that assaults our young people at every moment, on the way to school, on the way home from school, on television, on the weekend, another message, which is discourse is about pushing your product and hiding everything that's negative. Our politicians are advertisers. What they give us is an endless story. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good. And the other one is bad, 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 bad. We just saw that in that debate. That debate was a contest. How much bad can I fling on you? And how much of your bad I can deflect off of me, and meanwhile call you every name in the book. And Mr. Trump is an expert at that, although I must say he didn't come off real well, in my judgment, last night. He looked like a sputtering, bitter old man, to tell you the truth. And she has all over him because she's not bitter and she's not old, she's not a man, and all the rest. But nonetheless, abstracting from those differences, and they do have differences. I'm not saying that there's no difference between them. There are differences, including in economics, but they are very similar in this whole notion. And so, yeah, if you have a bad word like Marxism that's associated, look at Mr. Trump again. He actually repeated J.D. Vance's notion that immigrants are a serious problem in the state of Ohio because and to the extent that they eat pets. It's just the level of discourse. What are we talking? We all supposed to be going, oh my God, my dog, my cat is in danger. Are we that level? They used to say that our TV is pitched at the fourth grade level. That was a debate which at many moments didn't rise to the fourth grade.
This is just driving home to me that we are still living through a relic of the Cold War. In the Cold War, in the 1950s, we had what was known as the Lavender Scare. And this was part of the communist and the Marxist witch hunt, but also against homosexuals, in which it was coupled together. And again, today, it's sort of morphed into, once again, Marxism, immigrants as well, as it was in years past, and this time, transgender people. These are the boogeymen.
I was gratified. I'll tell you quite honestly, I was gratified that when Trump at one moment referred to her as a Marxist, even brought in her father as a Marxist, that this sort of led her, because she's on the screen, you can see her in that moment, roll her eyes and kind of smile to brush it off. And I was gratified that that's it. That was the end of it. Nobody brought it up again. He didn't. She didn't. The two questioners didn't pick it up. It was dealt with in a way that I thought understood. It's just a nasty, it's a flicked nasty, and we can go on to things that are less irrelevant than that. That wasn't said, but it was the way it was handled. And I think that is a sign that what you had in the 1950s and 60s might have been very different, might have been the beginning of a process of holding congressional hearings about the intrusion of Marxists. You could have had a whole extended political theater around this, terrifying people, losing their jobs, giving FBI agents 6 months of assignments, all of that. None of that seems to be happening now. Nobody is taking this very seriously. Not even the more conservative Republicans in Washington are picking, at least not yet, are picking this up and doing anything with it.
I do want to get into some of the substantive economic issues that are being contested in this election. A couple of them that came up last night, one being tariffs. The other that didn't really come up last night, and I was surprised because it's been a part of and got a lot of coverage, part of Kamala Harris's economic plan concerning price gouging. So tariffs and price gouging, these are two issues that I've heard you talk about on your program quite a bit over the recent years. And Donald Trump wants to bring more tariffs to countries importing their goods to the United States. Kamala Harris calls that a tax on these goods that we are all going to have to pay. And then when it comes to price gouging for Kamala Harris, she wants to institute measures to try to punish those who do price gouging in such arenas as grocery stores. And of course, Donald Trump and Republicans call this price controls. I want to get into both of these two issues with you. Let's start with tariffs. What's important to understand about tariffs, and what is Donald Trump talking about when he says bringing tariffs to goods coming to the United States?
Well, there's been an embarrassment about what Mr. Trump says regarding tariffs since the time of his presidency. So we're talking now quite a few years. and in particular his use of the term tariff war. I'm waging a tariff war, he said, against China, but there were other countries too. And he said that proudly, and he assured his audience that we will win this war. We have a trade war with China and a tariff war with China, and we're going to win them. They're winnable. Okay. When he talks like that, a group of economists, of whom I'm one, but I'm far from the only one, raised our hand in utter disbelief, because the way he spoke, and he did that again last night in the debate, the way he spoke was as if he believes that a tariff is paid by the country you impose it on. And that's just a mistake. That's a mistake that a freshman in a college economics course or a high school student in a high school economics course knows better than. Mr. Trump isn't paying attention, or he never did. Or the economic advisors he has dare not tell him of the nonsense he is speaking. And since I know, and because I have the same exact education as Janet Yellen, who is arguably one of the highest officials in Washington, was when he was a president, is now, etc., she certainly knows. Here's the reality. The word tariff is a word for a particular kind of tax. That's all. It's not something different from a tax. It's a kind of tax. What kind? It's not the kind that is taken out of your income, your weekly check. That's an income tax. Or it's not the kind of tax attached to when you buy something in the local department store. That's a sales tax. This is called a tax on imported goods and services produced outside the United States that are brought in and sold inside. If the product crosses the border into our country, it is taxed. And that tax is called a tariff. It could be called an import duty. And you know why I say that? Because it used to be called an import duty. To go back in American history, that's what it was called. Okay? It's an import duty. And now, next point. Who pays it? The importer. So everything that you buy, a French wine, a Japanese electronics, a coffee from Brazil, whatever, that's a good produced over there, coffee in Brazil, a wine in France, and so on, brought into the United States. The tax, the import duty, the tariff, is paid by the American company that imports whatever it is. It's not paid by the French wine producer or the Brazilian coffee producer or the Japanese electronics producer. If it's a tariff on Chinese goods, it's not the Chinese who pay it. They don't pay a nickel of that. That's a tax the American government places on the American importing business that brings stuff in from outside. Let me give you the grossest example right now, because it's important to our lives. Starting 10 or 15 years ago, every major car company in the world started work on the electric car. Here in America, we know one success story, Tesla and Elon Musk, because he's famous. But in fact, the competing car companies took 15 years, and we now know who won the competition. When I say we, I don't mean the American people, from whom this little detail has largely been kept. The most successful competitor in producing an electric car is something most Americans never heard of. It's called the BYD Corporation. B is in boy, Y is in yellow, and D is in dog. BYD. It's the largest producer of electric vehicles in China. It's a Chinese corporation. If you go to Europe right now, a quarter of all the electric vehicles on the road are BYD electric cars because they are the best and the cheapest. Nobody is close. Okay. What did the United States do? The United States put a tariff, a tax on electric vehicles from China. It used to be 27.5%. That's a lot. It was raised by Mr. Biden to 100%. Here's what it means. If there's a $30,000 electric car, which is the best in the world, and that's what the Chinese have, and that's what they offer for sale all over the world, where it is being bought in huge numbers all over the world, because it's the best and the cheapest. No mystery there. But there's 100% tax. So if you wanted to buy it here, you would have to pay $30,000 that goes to the Chinese producer, BYD, plus another $30,000, that's 100%, the same amount, that goes to Uncle Sam as a tax. Again, it goes to Uncle Sam. Now let me stop myself and make you all appreciate the Republican presidential candidate of a party that prides itself on being the tax-cutting party, proudly supports tariffs, that's a tax, on American business, that's who pays the tax, as if it weren't a complete contradiction to their anti-tax position of many decades standing. Amazing that he can get away with it. Amazing that he can keep saying that I hit the Chinese with a tariff. You didn't hit them. You hit the Americans with that tariff. The Chinese don't pay the tariff. This is amazing. And the only thing more amazing than that, he says this stuff, is my amazement when I read, for example, in the New York Times, articles and editorials, presumably supervised by editors there, who don't have the ability to say, wait, stop. There's a fundamental error. It's as if he said, if you travel west from New York, you will hit Ireland. No, you won't. You're going to hit China. Stop. He can't keep saying, I will hit Ireland, then we hit... Somebody has to say, excuse me, Emperor, you've got no clothes on. You're talking really out of the wrong end of your physical self here. Stop. But they don't. And so we have this conversation, which is very weird because it's a back and forth on the basis of a premise that is completely wrong-headed about it all.
Let me ask this. Donald Trump is not not your traditional Republican.
No.
He's also his politics seem to be much more around, at least his stated politics, around protectionism. Isn't the idea of a tariff, even if it is a tax, well, it is a tax, as you said, even as being a tax, isn't the idea then is that you are artificially driving up the price of foreign goods that come in order to give your domestic producers an edge in selling the product here on a national level?
Absolutely. That's what it is. And that's what the impulse is behind. Oh, he doesn't understand it, so he articulates it very poorly. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's a protectionist impulse. But here's the problem. This issue has been around for centuries. Countries, governments, before we had democracies, before we had parliamentary systems, when we had kings and queens, they too protected domestic. This is an old idea. And therefore, economists and other thinking people have asked the question, does it work? If you raise the taxes, do you get to protect your industry? And the answers that we've come to, which any half-educated person would have to acknowledge on some level, like you acknowledge I know about fire, and I know that we don't have to rub sticks together to get a fire going. We have this new invention, matches, they work. much faster. Yeah, okay, here's what the research has shown us for centuries. You will get some protection for some time, yes, but you will lose all kinds of things, which over time will not only accumulate, but overwhelm the protection you got. So you can play the game, but you better play it for a short time, and you better play it with a lot of adjustments, or else you're going to be real sorry. And the reason for that is not complicated. I'll give you just two examples. I'm going to play off the electric car because I already laid out the story. Every American company, oh, not every, but almost every American company, whatever they produce, has a need for trucks and or cars. And everybody is switching over sooner or later from the oil and gas, for all the reasons, to electric. Okay. Every American company will have to pay much more than their competitors around the world for their fleets of electric trucks and electric cars. Why? Because everybody else in the world is buying the best quality at the lowest price, which is China. Americans can't do it. They have to pay much more because they're buying domestic, which were protected by that tariff. Okay, you got good news for the American electric car companies. They got protected. Everybody else got screwed. Everybody else, the company in Wisconsin that is a taxi driver, they buy taxis. They're going to have to spend $50,000 for an inferior electric car compared to some other. Well, it's going to hurt them.
So it drives up the prices for everything.
Yes, the price for everything is shaped in part by the cost of the vehicle you buy, with the truck that brings your parts, with the truck that takes your output to wherever the market is. Every American producer, sooner or later, needs vehicles. And we are saying that in America, the price of electric vehicles is going to be markedly higher than everywhere else, which gives an edge to everywhere else, which is going to lead Americans to lose their jobs, lose their markets. That's what the research shows. That's what the empirical record shows. That's what any responsible political leader would have to acknowledge. Can you use protection for a particular industry at a particular time? Yeah, but you better put a short-term, maximum months or years on it. Promise to get out of it. And I haven't even told you what the biggest reaction is. The biggest reaction is retaliation. Mr. Trump talks as if we can put tariffs. Yeah, but so can everybody else. And then what happens to the American company, which wants to sell its goods in all those other countries that are slapping tariffs on America because America has hit them with tariff? Got to count that in too. That's going to have effects. It's going to cut off our markets. It is not simplifying. It is simple-minded to talk about tariffs the way he does, as if the Chinese pay the price for them, as if Americans are due, as if Mr. Trump came upon this great idea of a tariff, which has these wonderful, there we go, advertising mentality. You tell the plus story, you don't tell the minus story. He never worries about retaliation. Why? Because there isn't any? No, there is. The Chinese are already retaliated. They have. And we have lost out because of that. We are losing out right now. The Chinese, for example, have a monopoly or a near monopoly on something called rare earths, crucial minerals under the soil that you need for all kinds of advanced technology, including military. It exists under the ground in China. They have it. They've been selling it around the world, and America's been buying it. The Chinese announced, we may not sell it to you anymore. You tariff our electric cars. We exclude it. Hello. Where's the New York Times explaining to people there's a serious cost here? And the whole rest of the world let me drive this home. The whole rest of the world watches, and they see that the United States may, in a few weeks, elect this man again to do this tariff stuff. And they're saying to themselves, okay, we have to understand that in that country, that strange country, this sort of behavior is on the rise. The people seem to support it. They're voting for the guy in large numbers. He may win. And even if he doesn't, if he comes close, that's the lesson we have to take away. So you know what we have to do? We have to protect ourselves against his protecting. And that's what they'll do. And then the one protection will set off the other one, which is another one of the arguments in a ton of literature that say, don't go down this path because it will come back and bite you in the rear end.
And that's something that's agreed by Marxist economists and
yes,
classical
Marxist,
economists. And
listen, as I've told you before, in my PhD class in economics at Yale, one of my classmates was Janet Yellen. She knows exactly what's going on with tariffs. She's a smart person. She did well in her studies. She had the same teacher, the same books, the same lectures I did at the same time. She knows. She knows. And people like her who've had a reasonable education in economics, they know. There is something going on here that all the people who know, who should include editors of economics at the New York Times, heaven knows, seem to be out to lunch on this stuff. They're so lost in the low level of American politics that not only do we seriously discuss the eating of pets as an issue, but we actually discuss these tariffs as if we were 5 years old.
I want to make sure we have enough time for the other economic item I want to get into with you, and that is price gouging. This is part of the cornerstone of Kamala Harris's platform on the economy. Price gouging, especially at the supermarket. This is something that you have talked a great deal about on your own program, Economic Update. The critique, at least coming from the conservative side towards Kamala Harris and this idea around price gouging, is that she'll try to institute price controls. She denies that. What do you think is important to understand about price gouging and how you deal with it?
Okay. Price gouging is one of those topics where the beginning of an answer is to remind everybody that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What we see tells us more about us than what it is we're looking at. And here we go. In business, in capitalist business, there is a phrase: you charge what the market will bear. If you're a business person, you try to get the highest possible price that you can get in the market. The market is the disciplinarian. The market says if you raise the price above X, nobody will buy it, and that'll be your punishment. You went too far. And by the same token, if you charge too little, well, then you won't make the profit that will allow you to stay in business. So now you have to find your optimum price point. How high can you go? But the argument is you go as high as you can. Every business is taught that. Every business is busy doing that. If you're a large enough business, a corporation, you will hire professional economists like me, or people who are professional marketeering types, to advise you on when and how you can get your prices up. If you're the person who has to pay the prices, you are offended when the prices are driven up, Because for you, you're getting the same box of Cheerios or the same dozen eggs or the same pound of coffee, but you're having to give more and more of your hard-earned, scarce money to get the thing. And that's particularly true when prices in general are rising. That's called an inflation, which we've had in this country now for a while, because our economy, our capitalism, oscillates. We either face recession or we face an inflation. And we cure the one by risking the other. And then we cure the other and we go back to the one. And we accept that, which is a whole nother question. But that's how this kind of works. And you know what this means is that sometimes sellers of goods, and let's remember who sets the prices. Employers set prices. According to the U.S. Census, 3% of the American people are employers. The rest of us are not. We are employees, like you, Mitch, and me, right? I'm employed by a university. You're employed by a radio station, and so forth. Okay, those 3% set the prices. The employee is not asked to sit in a room and come up with the price of whatever that employee helps to produce. That's a prerogative of the management, of the people who run the company. Okay, so the employers see an opportunity to raise the price. That's what they're going to do. That's what they're in the business to do. If they're board of directors of a corporation, the people who own the shares of that company want those people to jack up the price when the market will bear it. Okay, so here's when this stuff begins to become crazy. Suppose there's a hurricane that devastates the public water supply in Louisiana. Ooh, suddenly you go to your corner store to pick up a plastic bottle of water, and the employer there, the little shopkeeper, looks at you, looks at the water, realizes it's going to be hard to get more water, and he's not going to sell it to you for 75 cents. It's going to be $7.50 or $75. Who knows? If he's going to go by the charge what the market will bear, he's going to know that people are going to be coming desperate for water. They will pay a great deal since the human body needs the water all the time, etc., etc. Well, why am I telling you this? Because the attack on Kamala Harris is again based on fundamental ignorance. Out of the 50 states in the United States, 38 of them, that is an overwhelming majority, already have laws on the books in those 38 states giving the government the right to come in and stop price gouging, by which they mean a sudden jacking up of the price, which is often written as responding to a natural or other event that allows companies to get away with that, or at least to try. So her idea of doing something about this isn't new, isn't radical, hasn't remotely anything to do with the Soviet Union or communism or anything. That's just an attempt to shut down that conversation. And who has the interest in doing that? The answer? The 3% employers. They don't want to be held back from the freedom to raise the price when they can get away with it. That's what business is. They're always looking for that opportunity, and they find it offensive to be told, no, 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 you won't be able to do that at will, because there'll be a government agency saying, ooh, ooh, you're gouging. You can't do that. That bottle of water has to sell for $2.50, no more than. Usually there's ranges and stuff like that of prices. It's not a pinpoint price. But anyway, all over the world, this is a problem. That's because of the way capitalism works, which incentivizes the employers to jack up prices. We have a term in the last few years, a new and interesting term here in America called greedflation. You may have seen it referred to in the press. That's a vague recognition of what I'm telling you, that businesses will raise the price not because the cost of energy has gone up, not because the wages they pay have gone up, but because they make more money.
And they can.
I always find this bizarre. They're told that the system will reward you. If your business is more profitable, it'll be worth more. You'll get more money into your own hands. Your company will have more prestige. Everything rewards profit maximization. So, of course, companies raise their prices as much as they can to boost their profits, because that's what they're there for. They say to them, oh, you mustn't do that. You should have a social consciousness about... All right, that's a lovely thing to say, maybe in church on Sunday, but no one takes that seriously, because in the world of business, that's a one-way street to your own demise, so you don't do that. So what you do is you gouge when you can. And the only protection the mass of people, the majority, the only protection you have is if you had a law like the 38 states do that allows the government at least to have the authority to come in and say, here is a case of gouging, therefore we are not going to let you raise the price beyond X, which is the way most of those laws are written.
If 38 states already have laws against price gouging, then how much do you actually think price gouging has been a part of the inflation that we experienced these past few years?
Oh, I think it's been the major part, because the truth of the matter is that those 38 states have the authority, but that doesn't mean they use the authority. They sit there and they watch. And the reason is because, of course, in the Republican-dominated states, but even in the Democratic Party-dominated states, the howl from the employers in their state, who are their major donors and all the rest, would reach the heavens. They don't want the government to come in at all, and they certainly don't want it to come in with the idea of constraining their freedom. Let's remember, if I'm a free enterprise, I want to be free to raise my prices as I see fit, or if you like, as far as the market will bear. And I don't want bureaucrats to come in here, especially responding to a public that is screaming about what they have to pay for a dozen eggs or a pound of coffee, et cetera, et cetera. That's a very dangerous thing for the free enterprise class of employers. So they are the big enemy. And so even they fight against these laws, just like they dumping on Kamala Harris for proposing it. They fought against them in every one of those 38 states. They lost that fight eventually, although they delayed it often for decades. And so now, having lost that battle, they can still fight by not having the law apply, by having no government official dare to say, oh, according to public law number 25, I have the right to say that quart of milk is going to have to come down 30 cents from what you've charged because it's gouging. All she did was to say, I'm going to investigate this on a national level, right? So that we don't have states competing with each other about it. So everybody's, it's a level playing field among the 50 states. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to look. That's all she said. I'm going to look at price. That was enough for the howling to start. And the equivalent in the Soviet Union, just for those who are interested, all prices were administratively set. That's a completely different idea. That's not waiting until they're too high. That's not bringing. No. It's a different system. Instead of having market buying and selling determine the price, it's an administrative decision to get certain things done. So in Russia, for example, you kept the price of housing low relative to the wages. Why? Because that enabled people with wages to buy homes, because it was connected that way. We don't do that, by the way. We're not so good at the housing either for that reason, especially now. but it's a different system. It's not about gouging. It's about how you organize a system. That's why using the Soviet example to smear her is, again, a mixture of dismissive politics and sheer accumulated stunning ignorance.
Richard Wolff is professor emeritus of economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, visiting professor at the New School in New York, host of the program Economic Update, and author of many books, his latest and his newest, called Understanding Capitalism. Richard Wolff, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for taking this time.
My pleasure too, Mitch. And if I may suggest, we should get together again in the near future and continue, because in my own humble opinion, the biggest economic issues were not commented on neither by Mr. Trump nor by Kamala Harris. And for me, even though the choice between them strikes me as obvious, and I'm sure people can tell which way I mean that, but the greater crisis for America is that these fundamental economic questions were simply not present last night. And that's not a good sign.
You want to come back next week?
Absolutely.
We can work out the schedule. I mean, we don't have to do that on air, but I'll bring you back soon. I'll bring you back soon. I'll take, careful what you say on this show.
It'll be a good part 2 to this conversation.
Then we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you, sir.